What would you do if betrayal shattered everything you believed in? My wife's infidelity didn't just end our marriage. It started a battle for my daughter, my freedom, and my future. The courts weren't fair, the odds weren't in my favor, and every step felt like an uphill fight. But this isn't just a story about loss. It's about resilience, redemption, and the strength to rise from the ashes. If you've ever been wronged or underestimated, stay with me, because this journey is proof that even the darkest moments can lead to a brighter tomorrow. It started as an ordinary day, one I thought would blend seamlessly with the rest. But life has a way of blindsiding you when you least expect it. A misplaced phone, hers, buzzed incessantly on the kitchen counter. Curiosity whispered louder than reason, and before I knew it, I was scrolling through texts that shouldn't have existed. Words exchanged between her and her colleagues weren't just casual banter. They told stories of secrets, of shared moments that shattered my trust. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. How had I missed this? The confrontation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was cold and calculated. Lily's denial quickly crumbled when faced with undeniable proof. The look in her eyes wasn't one of regret, but of annoyance, like I was an inconvenience for discovering her betrayal. That was the moment something inside me snapped. She wasn't just my wife, she was the mother of our daughter, Regina. The betrayal wasn't just mine to bear, it would ripple through Regina's life too. Walking out wasn't a question, it was an imperative. I filed for divorce the very next day, determined to shield Regina from the chaos that was now our reality. My focus shifted entirely to protecting her and securing custody. Every action I took from that point on was for her. But every meeting with lawyers, every court document, felt like a chess game where I was already a piece down. Could I fight against a system that didn't seem to care about the truth? Lily didn't take my resolve lightly. Her network of colleagues and her pristine public persona painted her as a sainted mother. Meanwhile, I became the villain in the eyes of people who had never heard my side of the story. The more I pushed, the more the world seemed to conspire against me. I realized this fight wasn't going to be fair. The courtroom was sterile, a place where truth and justice should prevail, or so I believed. I sat there, armed with evidence of Lily's infidelity, her neglect of Regina, and my unwavering commitment to being a present father. The confidence I'd brought with me started to crack as the hearing dragged on. Her attorney spun tales of my shortcomings, twisting every detail into a weapon against me. The judge barely glanced at the photos, messages, or timelines I'd carefully assembled. When the decision came, it hit like a freight train. Lily was granted full custody, and I was ordered to pay an astronomical amount in child support. My heart sank as I realized the system didn't care about the betrayal, only about appearances. Lily, poised and practiced, had convinced everyone that Regina was better off with her. I stared at the papers in disbelief, the weight of injustice settling heavy on my shoulders. Leaving the courthouse that day felt surreal. The world outside seemed oblivious to the storm inside me. Passers-by laughed, vendors sold snacks, and I, defeated and drained, tried to comprehend what had just happened. How could something so unjust feel so final? Worse still, how could I explain to Regina why I wouldn't see her every day anymore? My thoughts spiraled as I questioned every decision, every word spoken during the trial. The anger didn't fade. It simmered. Lily's victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. She'd taken Regina and painted herself the martyr. But I wasn't ready to give up. I resolved to fight, to find a way to challenge the decision, even if it seemed impossible. For now, though, I needed a plan. The court might have sided with her, but I wasn't out of moves yet. Reality hit hard after the court's decision. Monthly payments loomed like an unrelenting tide, leaving me scrambling to keep my head above water. Every check I wrote felt like a dagger twisting in my gut, not because of Regina, but because I knew where most of that money was going. Lily's life seemed untouched, even flourishing, while mine unraveled at the seams. I tightened my belt, sacrificed small luxuries, and learned to live on less. But the injustice gnawed at me relentlessly. One evening, staring at yet another overdue bill, inspiration struck. If the system wanted me to pay, I'd pay, but on my terms. The next month, I didn't write a check. Instead, I delivered Lily's child support in coins. It wasn't petty, I told myself. It was symbolic. Rolls and rolls of coins, each one a reflection of the weight she'd imposed on me. The first time I showed up at her lawyer's office wheeling a cart full of coins, the reaction was priceless. Lily's lawyer was livid, and Lily, her composed facade cracked just a little. It wasn't much, but it felt like a win. Each delivery became a small act of rebellion, a way to remind them both that I wasn't beaten yet. Of course, the inconvenience didn't go unnoticed. Their complaints piled up, but technically I wasn't breaking any rules. Word spread, and soon even strangers whispered about the guy with the coins. At first I felt vindicated, but over time I began to see how this battle was consuming me. Was this really the legacy I wanted to leave for Regina? As I wrestled with that question, I knew my next step had to be smarter. There were other ways to turn the tide, and I was determined to find them. After the storm settled, I found myself standing in the rubble of what used to be my life. The divorce, the court battles, the coin deliveries, it all felt like a lifetime ago. Now it was just me, a stack of bills, and Regina's picture on my desk. My real estate business, once a side hustle, became my lifeline. I threw myself into work, desperate to rebuild what had been torn apart. The long hours weren't just about money, they were about purpose, about proving to myself that I could still create something lasting. The days were filled with deals, contracts, and a quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. But the nights, they were quieter, emptier. I often found myself revisiting the past, dissecting every moment with Lily. Could I have seen it coming? Were there signs I ignored? These thoughts weren't just regrets, they were lessons. Slowly, I began to understand how much I'd overlooked in the name of keeping the peace. Regina was my anchor. Our time together, though limited by court orders, became sacred. I worked harder to be present, to show her that no matter the circumstances, she could count on me. Her laugh, her curiosity, her resilience, they reminded me of what mattered most. She didn't need a broken father, weighed down by bitterness. She needed someone who could teach her to rise above life's unfairness. As the months passed, I realized that rebuilding wasn't just about money or stability. It was about becoming someone I could be proud of. The scars Lily left didn't define me. They were reminders of where I'd been and how far I still had to go. My fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a while, I felt like I was on solid ground. The courtroom wasn't new, but the stakes had never felt higher. My latest coin delivery had been deemed contempt of court, and before I could process what was happening, the gavel fell. A few months in jail, they said, a punishment for defying the system. My heart sank as I heard the verdict, but deep down, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The fight had taken everything from me. Maybe this was my chance to pause and regroup. Prison wasn't what I expected. The first few days were the hardest, adjusting to the routine, the confinement, the constant hum of tension in the air. But I quickly learned to adapt. I kept my head down, observed, and found pockets of quiet amidst the chaos. The solitude, oddly enough, became my ally. It gave me time to think, to strategize, to figure out my next move. Letters from Regina became my lifeline. Her words were filled with love, support, and a maturity that astounded me. She didn't blame me for being there. Instead, she reminded me of my strength. Those letters were a spark, igniting a fire that I thought had burned out. I wasn't just surviving in that cell. I was planning, calculating, waiting for the right moment to turn things around. Jail strips you down to your essentials, forcing you to confront who you are. I learned that resilience isn't about brute strength. It's about endurance, about holding on to your purpose when everything else has been taken away. My time there wasn't a setback. It was a lesson. And when the doors finally opened, I knew I'd walk out stronger, with a plan that would shake the very ground Lily stood on. Every visit from Regina felt like sunlight piercing through a stormy sky. The sterile walls of the prison faded away the moment I saw her face. She walked in with a confidence I hadn't noticed before, carrying an energy that lifted my spirits. Her visits weren't just about catching up. They became moments of revelation. She shared her thoughts, her dreams, and even her frustrations about the situation. It was as though she'd grown years older in the time we'd been apart. Her insight astounded me. Regina spoke with a clarity that sometimes left me speechless. "Dad," she said during one visit, "you're stronger than this place." Her words weren't just comforting. They were a challenge. She believed in me, in my ability to rise above this mess and reclaim the life we'd lost. That belief became my fuel, reigniting the drive I thought had been extinguished. We talked about the future, sketching out dreams that seemed distant, but not impossible. She told me about school, about her aspirations, and even about the subtle ways she'd started standing up for herself at home. Knowing that my resilience had inspired hers was both humbling and empowering. Regina was watching me, learning from me, and I couldn't afford to let her down. Those visits weren't just reunions. They were rebuilding moments. Each one strengthened our bond, reminding me of what truly mattered. Regina wasn't just my daughter. She was my partner in this fight, my reason to keep going. As I watched her leave after each visit, her parting words echoed in my mind. "You've got this, Dad." And I believed her. Freedom came with a clear purpose. I wasn't looking for chaos or petty satisfaction. I wanted justice. Justice for Regina, for myself, and for the years stolen from us. The plan began to take shape in the quiet moments behind bars, each piece meticulously crafted. Lily's network of allies, her seemingly untouchable reputation, they were her armor. My goal wasn't to break her directly, but to unfasten every buckle until it fell apart on its own. I started small, using my connections in real estate to disrupt her stability. Anonymous tips about zoning issues and inspections caused headaches for her new ventures. It wasn't enough to ruin her financially, but it kept her scrambling. Next, I focused on her professional life. An anonymous email with the right documents landed on her boss's desk. Her colleagues, once allies, began to distance themselves as the cracks in her facade became harder to ignore. Timing was everything. I wasn't reckless, and I never left a trail. Each move was calculated, every action a whisper in the shadows. Watching her stumble wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about leveling the playing field. For too long, she'd held the upper hand, her lies weaving a web I couldn't escape. Now I was the one pulling the strings, though carefully from a distance. But it wasn't all satisfaction. There were moments when I questioned my own motives, wondering if this path would ultimately make me the person Regina needed me to be. Yet as I saw Lily struggle with the consequences of her choices, I couldn't ignore the quiet sense of justice it brought. The game wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like I was the one in control. Months of careful maneuvering finally bore fruit. The legal system, so rigid and unforgiving before, now felt like an opponent I could outsmart. Through a new lawyer, one with a reputation for exposing judicial errors, I uncovered discrepancies in the original case. Slowly but surely, the pieces began to fall into place. Lily's narrative, once unshakable, started to crumble under scrutiny. Hearings were tense, but this time I had the upper hand. Evidence that had been dismissed earlier was re-evaluated, and her once perfect image began to show its flaws. The financial terms of the divorce, which had left me struggling, were renegotiated. For the first time in years, I could breathe a little easier. The court acknowledged the imbalance, though they stopped short of an apology. It wasn't perfect, but it was a win. When the day of my release arrived, I stepped outside with a mix of triumph and exhaustion. The world felt bigger, brighter, and full of possibilities I hadn't dared to dream of in years. But there was no time for celebration. My priorities were clear: Regina and our future. Every step I took away from that prison was a step toward rebuilding, not just my life, but hers too. Freedom came with a renewed sense of purpose. The legal battle had taught me patience, strategy, and the value of persistence. Lily still had to face the consequences of her actions, but I wasn't consumed by revenge anymore. I'd won the most important fight, my right to move forward, and now it was time to use that victory wisely. Regina's decision to emancipate herself caught me off guard. She wasn't running away. She was stepping into her own power, determined to create a space where she could thrive. Watching her claim her independence stirred a mix of pride and longing in me. She'd grown so much in the shadow of our struggles, and now she was ready to carve her own path. Still, she didn't do it alone. She came back to me for guidance, for support, and most importantly, for the bond we'd fought so hard to preserve. Together, we revisited the old neighborhood, the one that had seen the best and worst of our lives. Regina wasn't there to dwell on the past. She was there to build something new. With the savings and skills I'd managed to salvage, we found a small fixer-upper. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Side by side, we painted walls, fixed leaky faucets, and laughed over botched DIY projects. Every brushstroke, every nail hammered, felt like a step toward healing. Regina infused the house with her energy, her optimism, and a wisdom far beyond her years. She'd inherited my resilience, but tempered it with a kindness I sometimes lacked. Seeing her thrive was a reminder of why every sacrifice, every battle had been worth it. This wasn't just a home. It was a testament to what we could accomplish together. The neighborhood welcomed us back with cautious warmth. They'd seen the fallout of my marriage, the whispers of scandal that followed Lily. But as the weeks turned into months, our little house became a symbol of something else: renewal. Regina and I weren't just rebuilding a structure, we were rebuilding a family, one stronger and more united than ever. Life after everything felt different, not just quieter, but more deliberate. I didn't rush anymore. Each decision, each step was taken with care, as if I were piecing together a puzzle whose image was only now becoming clear. Regina and I had carved out a life that was simple but full. Our bond had weathered storms most families couldn't imagine, and it had only grown stronger for it. I poured myself into my work, not for revenge or to prove a point, but to build something lasting. The business thrived, and I finally allowed myself to feel proud, not just of the deals I closed, but of the person I was becoming. The man I saw in the mirror wasn't perfect, but he was someone Regina could look up to, someone who valued freedom, integrity, and love above all else. As for Lily, life had a way of balancing the scales. The cracks I'd exposed in her facade had grown wider. I didn't revel in her struggles. Instead, I saw them as a reminder that actions have consequences. She and I no longer exchanged words, only nods at the rare events where our paths crossed. The bitterness had faded, replaced by a quiet resolve to let the past stay where it belonged. Regina, now grown and flourishing, stood as a testament to everything we'd endured and overcome. Watching her take on the world with confidence and grace made every sacrifice worthwhile. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours, a testament to resilience, redemption, and the power of family. And as I looked toward the future, I knew one thing for certain. We were finally free.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.